Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Today we'll start the new chapter of knowledge management course, the role of organizational culture. In this chapter we'll see what is a culture. We'll talk about different types of cultures. We will also discuss the organizational maturity models, and we'll see how to transform the culture of an organizational into a knowledge sharing culture. Finally, we will also see briefly the impact of mergers on the culture and the impact of virtualization on an organizational culture. Right? To understand what is a culture and what is an organizational culture, we start with a hypothetical analogy. Let's say there are 4 groups of 10 individuals at a park at a lunchtime, and there are rain clouds threatening some rain. So in the first group, someone gets up and says, "Get up and follow me." Okay. In the second group, let's say someone says, "Here's the plan," and he makes a complete plan. He chalks out a very detailed plan. Each one of us will stand up, marches in the direction of that apple tree, maintains a distance of 2 feet apart, and blah, 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 right? So this guy is coming up with a detailed plan of how to deal with rain, even the rain has not started yet. In the third group, we do not have a leader. A few people, they get together and they start conversing, they start some discussion. Okay, it's going to rain. Why don't we go to that apple tree? We'll stay dry and have fresh apples for lunch and blah, blah, blah. So some people, they get together and they start doing certain brainstorming and they try to come up with a plan how to deal with a disaster that is coming up. In the fourth group, someone tells a story about the time. So someone says, okay, I was in a park and we were like 5 friends and the rain started and then this happened and that happened, we did this and that and so on and so forth. So these 4 groups, they illustrate different kind of microcultures in evidence. So the first group, it illustrates an authoritarian doctrine, someone who wants to impose his or her thinking on a group of people. He is showing his authority, or he knows the best. He knows how to deal with the situation. So he wants all the people to follow him. So this is an authoritarian microculture. The second group, group 2, it embodies a micromanagement culture. So in micromanagement, the leader is planning each and every fine detail of the plan. Right? In the third group, it is a grassroots brainstorming or a collaborative or a consensus-driven culture. Here, we do not have a leader, but a group of people collaborate with each other, do certain brainstorming, and come up with a plan to deal with any situation. Right? So it is consensus-driven, it is collaborative kind of culture. And the last one is called storytelling, to share the knowledge of lessons learned and best practices from the past experience. So these are four kinds of cultures that you will see in many places, in many organizations. Before we go to the details of the corporate culture, let's try to understand what is a culture. We use this word on daily basis, but and there are many definitions. Many definitions. You will see in the book chapter that there are many definitions. All of them they have the same basic concepts with different languages or different expressions. So what is a corporate culture? Is a set of understandings often unstated. Well, the culture is not written anywhere. It is not a written document. It is not stated explicitly, but it is there. It is in the lives of the people. So these are the set of understandings that members of a community share in common. These shared understanding consist of our norms, values, attitudes, beliefs, and paradigms. So, like you can see the different cultures, like West has a typical culture, East has its own set of norms, values, attitudes, and beliefs. If you go to Middle East, it has its own culture. If you go to the South Asia, it has its own culture. If you go to the West or US, it has its own culture. So every culture has its own norms, values, beliefs, and attitudes. Like the amount of respect a woman receives in the Eastern culture or in the Arab culture, it is very different from the respect that a woman receives in a Western culture. I will not say what is right or wrong, but I'm just saying that the type of attitude towards women in an Arab culture is completely different from the attitude in Western culture. So in any corporate also, every company has different emphasis on different values, on different norms, and they have different paradigms, right? And these are not stated explicitly, these are not taught to the people, but they are developed with time, and every newcomer will adapt himself to adopt this culture in his life. There are different types of cultures, and there's a good analogy between organizational culture and the climate control of a large building. Just like in a large building, when we have some climate control, we will set the temperature to, let's say, room temperature, let's say 20 degrees or 22 degrees Celsius. But different parts of a large building will have different, what we call, microcultures. Let's say one big hall which is exposed to direct sunlight will have a different temperature as compared to another room which is not exposed to direct sunlight and which has some indoor plants, and let's say it also has a carpet on the floor, right? So just like in a big building, although the temperature is set at one setting, but different parts of the building will have different microcultures. Similarly, in a building, we have one, you can say, overall culture, and we will have several microcultures in different departments, in different sections, and in different groups of the people. To be able to understand the different types of culture, we can divide them in two dimensions. One is solidarity and the other is sociability. So the solidarity can be high or it can be low, and similarly the sociability can be high or low. So a culture with high solidarity and high sociability will be a communal culture. One with low solidarity and high sociability will be a network culture, and similarly we can have a mercenary culture and a fragmented culture in which we have low solidarity and low sociability. Let's see uh, the, some more details of all these four kinds of cultures. In a communal culture, I'm sure all of you are well aware of communism, which is a form of government. So it gives its members a sense of belonging. As you know, in communism, there's a sense of community. Everybody is at a same level, everybody belongs to the same community, and there is a leader that must be followed. So the leaders in this culture, they are mostly very inspirational and they have a charismatic personality so that everyone follows them blindly. The major negative aspect in this culture is that they often exert too much influence. The leaders exert too much influence on the other people, and the other members are rarely heard in this culture. But they have a sense of belonging. But mostly it is task driven. They are not they do not have a say in decision making, but they have a sense of belonging in the tasks done in the organization. In a network culture, as the name implies, the people are strongly connected with each other and they have a sense of belonging like friends and family, right? So the people, they are strongly networked together. They have close contact with each other and they share more love and respect for each other. The main disadvantage of this closely knitted kind of culture is that the people are reluctant to point out and criticize the poor performance of their peers or partners or other members in the organization or in the community. In mercenary culture, there is too much focus on strict goals. It is more target oriented, it is more goal oriented, it is more performance oriented kind of culture. The members are expected to meet the goals and get the job done very quickly. It is performance driven. It is not based on some kind of mercy, or as we saw in the previous culture, the network culture, it is more friendly. Mercenary culture is not friendly at all. So here, the people with poor performance, they are treated very badly. The main focus in this culture is performance. You only have to give the best of your best. That's it. Fragmented culture is opposite to the, you can say, networked culture. Here the people are distant, they are disconnected from each other. The sense of belonging to an identification of organization is very weak. So the people, they do not belong, they do not connect with each other, they do not trust each other, or they do not cooperate with each other, and this is the downside of this culture, that there's a lack of cooperation. So it's a very bad kind of culture. If we have a fragmented culture in our organization, we need to think of the ways to connect the people, to give them a sense of belonging, or to have shared objectives and goals. The culture is at the foundation of knowledge management. We are looking at the culture from knowledge management perspective. So knowledge management implementation almost always requires a cultural change. If we are not looking at big changes, at least there will be a tweaking of the existing culture so that we promote a culture of knowledge sharing and collaboration between the people. And whenever we want to bring a change in the culture, there's always some kind of resistance from the people. So many times the resistance is not like the people, they do not want to change. It is that they are not told about the benefits of the change. So the people will resist the change if they do not see any benefit in the change. If we change the culture and we tell them precisely the benefits that they will get from this change, then they will be willing to change to a more knowledge sharing culture. But if we just ask them to start knowledge sharing, they will not do. This is not how the things will work. Corporate culture is a key component of ensuring that critical knowledge and information uh, flow within an organization. The strength and commitment of a corporate culture is at least as important as the communication technologies implemented for knowledge sharing. So the technology, it can provide them means for enabling the knowledge sharing, but the strength and commitment of corporate culture is also at least as important as this technology. So if we do not bring about a cultural change, just providing them the technologies or just providing them the knowledge, it is not going to be sufficient. So a cultural change is very important to enable, to support, or to catalyze knowledge management in the organization. Traditionally, knowledge flowed or was shared vertically. It means in a single department or a business function, the knowledge flows from top to the bottom, right? But in the organization, we also need to enable knowledge sharing horizontally. So the knowledge need to be shared between different functions of the organization. It needs to be flowed from top to bottom in a vertical manner in a single business function in one department in one section, and it also needs to be shared horizontally with different departments or different business functions in the organization. The organizations need to recognize and reward knowledge sharing. So to enable a knowledge sharing culture, or the organization, they need to give certain incentives, they need to give certain rewards to the people who share the knowledge, as opposed to the people who hoard the knowledge, who keep the knowledge to themselves. Communication technology is an enabler of knowledge sharing, but as we said before that it cannot achieve the objective alone. The technology alone is not sufficient to enable the knowledge sharing, right? So it can help you in knowledge sharing, but it cannot achieve this purpose alone. The cultural change is sufficient. The Gruber and Duxbury in 2000 did a study, a comprehensive study, and they came up with some characteristics of a knowledge sharing culture. The first characteristics is that we need to have a reward structure. As we saw before, that if we give reward to the people who share their knowledge, it will encourage them. And if we have disincentives for the people who hoard the knowledge, it will also encourage them to give up this quality and share their knowledge, start sharing their knowledge. The second characteristic is openness or transparency. There should be an openness, there should be a transparent culture, so that the people they share their knowledge openly, right? So there should not be any secret or hidden agendas. Everything should be transparent, because we saw before in the knowledge application chapter that knowledge is power, and the people they have certain reservations when they share the knowledge. So if we have an open and transparent culture, it will enable knowledge sharing. Trust, we should have shared objectives, as we discussed before, that the people, if they trust each other, then it will develop a knowledge sharing culture. If they do not trust, then they will not share their knowledge. And the top management support is also essential to facilitate communication horizontally and vertically, from top to bottom and from bottom to up, and in different business functions. Top management support is essential characteristics of a knowledge sharing culture. Then the effects of culture on individuals. Whenever an individual joins a new organization, he or she gels in the culture. He or she adopts the culture very quickly. So, the question is, how does the organization culture control the behavior of organizational members? How do the people they adopt this behavior? How it is embedded in their lives? The studies have shown that there are four basic ways in which a culture creates high level of cross individual behavioral consistency. These four basic ways they create this consistency in the behavior of the individuals. The first thing is social norms. Every culture has certain norms. Like again, talking about Saudi Arabian culture, it is a norm that, let's say, if a woman steps on a road, it is a norm that the driver must stop the vehicle. It is a norm, right? Or in a public transport, it is a norm in many cultures that if there is an elderly or a differently enabled person, then the person, a normal person, he or she will leave the seat for a differently abled person or for an elderly person. These are social norms. So, social norms are one of the most important driving factors in the individual behavior, right? Shared values. Every culture has some common values like honesty, truth, uh, respect of the people, kindness. So these are the common values. These are the shared values which make which result in a consistent behavior of the individuals. Shared mental models. Mental models, as we discussed before also in another chapter, in an earlier chapter, they are like the causal analysis. If this, then that. And the managers, they have certain mental models that they follow for decision making. Let's say, for example, a manager believes that the employee satisfaction is directly related to the performance of the employees, this manager will make the decisions that will improve the employee satisfaction in his work environment. And if all the managers they have the same thinking, then it will result in this shared mental model, and it will develop a culture, right? So these shared mental models, they they have a strong impact on developing a culture in an organization. And the last thing is social identities. Many times when the people they become a part of a group, they have like a sense of belonging with that group, and they will try to copy all the traits or the characteristics of that group. It will be embedded in them, right? So it will become like a social identity. Okay, like let's say a student, when he or she graduates, let's say after graduation you are hired as a teaching assistant in the same university. So now your social identity changed. Till yesterday you were a student, but today you became like a faculty member. You became a teaching staff. So now you will behave completely different. The behavior of a student is completely different from a behavior of a faculty, and as soon as one joins the teaching staff, he will try to copy all the teachers that he used to idealize, or he was inspired from them, right? So these social identities, they have they have huge impact on the behavior of the people, right? So building upon this impact of the culture on individuals, the organizational culture, how it develops, the organizational culture will establish set of roles, social identities. As I said before, in an organization, there are many groups or social identities. An organization will create many roles. Like student is one role, faculty member is a different role. The support staff is a different role. The vice president is a completely different role, right? So an organization will establish many roles and or what we call social identities. Next, it will establish set of role expectations. As I said before, that expectations from a faculty member are completely different from the expectations from a student, right? So every identity has associated expectations. Next, establishes the status or value or worth to the reference group of each social identity. So every social identity in the organization has an associated worth. Of course, the worth of a full professor is more than a worth of, let's say, lab staff, right? So every social identity will have an associated worth or a value or a status. Then provide the organization culture provides values, cognitive schema, and mental model to influence how individuals behave. As I said before, that the managers they share certain values and the mental models to make the decisions, to make consistent decisions in the same organization. So the organizational culture will provide these mental models to its members. Next is organizational cultural analysis. Culture surrounds us all, and we need to understand how it is created, embedded, developed, manipulated, managed, and changed. So, if we want to understand the organization well, we need to understand the culture, how it is created, embedded, developed, manipulated, and managed in the organization. So, it is like a blueprint of the organization. If you want to understand the organization, where it is going, you can map it with the culture that is that is there in the organization. Shein proposed three levels of culture in an organization. The first and the most obvious level of the culture is artifacts. This is the visible part of the culture, right? Like the dress code. So some organizations, they do not follow any dress code, but some organizations, they have very strict dress code for all the people. Similarly, the office space, it is another artifact or the obvious part, a visible part of the culture. So in one organization, maybe everybody has individual office. In another organization, we may have cubicles or shared offices. Okay? In one organization, maybe the manager sits with the employees. In another, the manager has a different office with a personal secretary and so on and so forth. Right? So these artifacts, this is the first level or the most obvious or visible level of the culture. The things that you see that are obvious. The second thing is values. These are stated strategies, goals, philosophies, and justifications, and they are included in behavior and attitude of the people. Like Google has a stated value or uh, a goal, do not be evil, right? So it is a stated value, and it will become a part of behavior or attitude of the people who become a part of this organization. The third and the lowest level is the assumptions. These are the basic underlying assumptions. They are unconscious, taken for granted beliefs, perceptions, thoughts, feelings, and so on and so forth. We all know that we have to be honest. We all know that we should never lie. We all know that we should be kind and polite with other people. So these are the basic assumptions, right? So we assume that everybody follows these guidelines or standards, right? So these are three levels of every culture. The next thing is organizational maturity models. The culture in an organization, it is not like a static thing. There are many maturity models which help us in evaluating the maturity of any organizational culture. So these are frameworks for understanding current culture of an organization. And if we know where we stand now, we can understand the stages of how the change can be introduced in the culture, and we can identify the obstacles and enablers in order for the organization to attain the next level. So they say that you cannot improve something that you cannot measure, right? So if we want to improve the culture of an organization, first we need to be able to measure the culture of the organization. So these maturity models, they provide us a way to gauge, to analyze, or to measure the current culture of the organization, where we are and where we need to go. And then you can make a plan of how you can move to the next levels of the culture to attain more maturity in your organizational culture. So before moving to the formal maturity models, let's have a quick look at a general way of integrating a new way of doing the things in the organization. In the horizontal axis, you can see time, and at vertical axis, we have commitment, right? So if an organization wants to introduce a new way of doing the things in the organization, the first thing the organization needs to do is to contact the people, okay, who will be involved in this process. Next, we need to create an awareness of the new process, of the new way of doing the things. We need to develop an understanding, clear understanding of how the things need to be done. And here you can see we need to more commitment from the people. The next trial, it will need much more commitment. So now the people, they will do a trial, okay, and if the trial is successful, then they will adopt this new way, and after some time it will become institutionalized. It will become a part of the behavior of the people, right? So this is a very general framework of introducing any new process, any new scheme of doing the things. Now there are many models for measuring organizational maturity, and this one is uh, based on CMM. I'm sure all of you know capability maturity model, which is used in software engineering to measure the maturity of development process, right? So this maturity model, it is based on this capability maturity model, which is used in software engineering for process maturity, for the development process maturity. So the first level is chaotic, the second is ad hoc, the third is organized, managed, and the highest level of the cultural maturity in an organization is agile. Let's quickly go through these different stages or levels. The first, chaotic. As the name implies, there is a chaos. Okay? Actually, there is no culture, right? So we do not have any culture in the organization. It is a chaos. It is just a mess. Decision making is in flight. All the decisions are made at runtime, on the fly. Okay. The leadership structure is vague. We do not know the clear leadership structure. Sometimes A is leading, and in the next day B is leading the organization. Operational model is undefined. Employees are evaporating. The employee retention is very, very low, right? So as the name implies, it is a chaos. We do not have any culture in the organization. The second is less chaotic. It is called ad hoc. It is also like a chaos, but it is slightly better than that. So there are multiple local cultures, leadership structures, and operational models. So now we do not have one consistent culture, but we have many local cultures, and there is local decision making. There is some kind of decision making, but it is local. We do not have a vision, we do not have the strategic goals and objectives, but the decisions are being made as and when needed, right? So we have some kind of ad hoc culture. Next is organized. So now we again have many local cultures, but they are similar. They are merging together. You can see some kind of similarity in these cultures. There is still local decision making, but it is based on corporate strategy. It is not as coherent as it needs to be, but it is based on some corporate strategy. We have stable employee base. The people, they are not leaving the organization as much as they are in chaotic and ad hoc, right? The next is managed. So now we have cohesive corporate culture and operational model. We have corporate strategy drivers. We have operational tactics. We have corporate leadership team, coaches, and empowers local leaders. Employees are recruited, reunited based on strategic decision. And the agile is the highest level at which the culture adapts strategically. We have a stable culture and it also adapts based on the new strategic demands that need changes in the organization. The operation model changes dynamically, so the we have ways to optimize, and there is some kind of change management also. Whenever there is any change, the organizational culture will also adapt according to these changes, right? The next model is Infosys KM maturity model. The 5 levels are default, reactive, aware, convinced, and sharing level. So at default level, the complete dependence on individual skills and abilities. As we had seen in the previous culture, that the people, they are making decisions on the fly. So we do not have any leadership or structured flow of information from top to bottom, but it is individual based. In reactive, there is ability to perform tasks constituting the basic business of the organization repeatedly. As in CMM, we have repetition as a second level. So here the tasks are performed repeatedly, and from knowledge sharing perspective, people are aware of knowledge as an asset through the formal training and mentoring process. Some pockets of knowledge sharing are there. The people, they are not sharing the knowledge as a policy, as a culture, but there are some people who are sharing the knowledge at a local level. The next is aware. There is restricted ability for data-driven decision making. So here we have decision making based on certain facts and data. So of course the decisions at this level, they will be much better as compared to here, where the individual skills are the core of decision making. And from knowledge management perspective, the people are educated on knowledge management. Some environmental scanning and knowledge dissemination is there. The process of content structure management, taxonomy of knowledge, technology and infrastructure is there, right? So the people are aware that knowledge management is a good thing and it needs to be shared among the people. Then convinced is the next level. The quantitative decision making for strategic and operational applications is widespread. Okay, the customized enabling is there. The value added content is there. Quantitative knowledge management process, for example, KM metrics such as percentage of content use, quality ratings, and so on and so forth. So the people, they are convinced of knowledge sharing. And the last level, the highest level, is sharing, and the organizational capability is to the organization is completely able to manage organizational competence quantitatively, There is strong return on investment driven decision making and so on and so forth. So expertise integration, content and expertise available organization wide. The knowledge leverages through frictionless knowledge flows. It is embedded in the processes and it is complete frictionless kind of flow between the people, right? Another KM maturity model is Forrester Group KM maturity model. It is based on how the people are facilitated for knowledge management and knowledge sharing. So the first level assisted, at this level the employees codify with the help of knowledge journalists, right? So when they want to share the knowledge, they are provided the help of the specialized people, we call them journalists, to make their knowledge accessible to the other people. And when they want to get knowledge from the other people, they are facilitated through the librarians to find the relevant knowledge for them. So how they can share their knowledge with others and how they can get the others' knowledge to use it in their daily life. So the typical incentives for this are knowledge support office, the yellow pages, the community of practice. These are the initiatives at this level, assisted. So the people are assisted for knowledge sharing. Next is self-service. Employees codify on their own without help. As the name implies, here the people, they are doing the knowledge sharing uh, uh, at their own behalf. They are doing it by themselves. So for their sharing, they will codify themselves, and for getting other people's knowledge, they find the information by themselves through, let's say, search engines. The initiative at this level are push technologies and customized knowledge management. The third is organic level. Knowledge management happens in the background. It is embedded in the business processes, right? So the people, they do not have to do it intentionally. It is just happening in the background. It is embedded in the business processes. It is embedded in the organization. It is like the culture in the organization. Information provided with when needed, just in time, just enough time. We have discussed time before, I believe. And the initiative is personalized knowledge management, right? So these maturity models, they can help any organization to measure their culture, where they stand. Let's say if an organization, it stands at assisted level, they know what initiatives they need to take. Okay, they need to take to move to the next level of, let's say, self-service, and what initiatives they need to take to move to the next level, which is organic. Let's say another organization who follow this Infosys KM model, and when they analyze the culture, they find out that they are at the aware stage. So they know what they need to do to move to the convinced or sharing stage, right? So once the organization has identified their requirements, let's see how they can transform to a knowledge sharing culture. So many times you will hear the people saying that we need to change the culture in our organization. So what do they mean? Actually, they mean by this statement, they mean that there is some kind of behavioral change which is required in the organization. For example, employees paying more attention to the customers, or that they want managers to come to the meetings on time, right? So we need some change. We need some change in the behavior of the people, right? Now, the patterns of behavior, we need a change, but how we can make the change happen? The change in the behavior of the people can be made by two ways. The first is changing the organizational structure, the rules, the policies, the regulations, reward and punishment system, right? We can change the behavior of the people by this way, or we can change by changing the culture of the organization. Now, cultural changes are very difficult because they involve changing the underlying mechanism that drive this behavior. You need to change the norms, you need to change the social values of the people, you need to change the mental models of the people. And it is not easy, it is very difficult, it is very hard to bring about the cultural change. So, the changing of behavior by changing the structure, it will be more appealing because it is easier, right? You can change the policy. Like, let's say the people, they are not coming to the office in time, so you can change the rule. You can say that, okay, the employees, they need to punch in by using, let's say, fingerprint scanners or punch cards or smart cards, whatever. So the time when they check in the office, it will be noted, and the time when they leave the office, it will be noted, right? So you can introduce a new rule. So for any behavioral change, it is more appealing to change the structure or to change the rules or policies of the organization. However, this strategy is usually not successful. Why? Because the structure and culture, they are at conflict. You did not make a change in the culture, so the culture is still the same, and you change the structure, so now it will not work. The people, they are smart. The people will find ways to fool the system, right? So if you did not embed honesty in the people, okay, they will find a way to fool the structure or the rules in the organization, right? So if you want to make the people more punctual or more honest or more truthful, try to develop a culture that helps or that awards these things, right? That encourages this kind of behavior. We'll see how to do it shortly. So, how to bring about the culture change? Okay, as we said before, that let's say the employees are not coming at time. The manager, he wants them to come in time. The first thing that the manager can do is to become a role model. If the manager himself does not come in time, how he can expect his employees to come in time, right? So role modeling is the first thing that will bring a change in the culture. If the manager is a liar, how he can expect his employees to speak the truth, right? So the employees, the lower staff, they will always copy their managers. So if the managers themselves are role model, it will become a change. If the lower staff is not coming in time, definitely the manager is not coming in time, right? Next thing is storytelling. A lot of culture uh, shifts is copied through storytelling. So when the people, they share their success stories, they share the mistakes that they made. Now these things, the people are smart, right? So they will learn these things They will try not to repeat those mistakes. They will try to repeat the behaviors that bring about success, right? So storytelling is one way that can change the culture. Leaders' emphasis on values and assumptions, especially in crisis time. So how much emphasis the leaders put on values and assumptions, especially when there is a crisis in the organization. Let's say the company, it lost a bid, it lost a contract, and another company, they won it because they lied, because they exaggerated, because they made false promises. So, how the leaders, how firm they are in this crisis situation. So, if they ensure their employees that no matter we lost this contract or this opportunity, but the values, our values are more important than money to us. So, it will trigger a cultural change. It will ensure the other employees that yes, the values are important for us, because our managers, they are willing to bear a loss, but they are not willing to compromise on values, right? Another thing is reward system. So as we were discussing before, that if an organization, it rewards the people who share the knowledge with other people, it will trigger a change of culture. The other people, they will also be willing to share the knowledge. Important and public decisions. So many times the public decisions that the company makes, they deliver a message to the people in the organization. Let's say that there's a crunch time in the organization, and let's say the first budget cut that they made, it was, let's say, in the training. So they convey a message to the people that training is not as important as, let's say, some other stuff, right? So these important decisions or the public decisions, they convey a message to the employees. What the leaders praise and criticize. Another thing, the leaders, they praise certain things and they criticize certain things. So that it also conveys a message to the people that these are the boundaries. We should not step out or step in. Another thing, important thing is in the organizational culture is the content versus context. Most programs for changing culture inside of companies do not work because they address content or the process. So many times the many programs for changing the culture, they do not succeed because they focus only on content or they focus only on the process. Let's say you made a lot of effort in collecting all the knowledge management, or you made certain processes for knowledge management, but you did not address the context, the behavior of the people. Context can be the mindset, the behavior of the people, or the organization culture, right? So the people, they do not just go off and they invent their context, they inherit it. We live in a culture, we live in the context, right? So if you want to, let's say, the organization, they want to develop or encourage the users to share their knowledge, right? So it cannot be simply done by capturing all the implicit knowledge and putting it in a knowledge repository, right? So what we need to do, we need to develop a knowledge sharing culture to make use of this knowledge, right? So how we can develop a knowledge sharing culture? The first thing, there are many things that can be done. The first thing having knowledge journalists begin interviewing key people to document projects, best practices, lessons learned, and good stories, right? So it sends a message that there are knowledge journalists who are collecting the data, who are going to capture all the knowledge. The implicit knowledge is being transferred into explicit knowledge, and so on and so forth. Another thing many organizations they do, they organize certain knowledge management get-togethers, like informal meetings of the people on breakfast, let's say lunch and learn sessions, any informal gatherings, the trips to the different places outside the organization. So in these get-togethers, the people get a chance to interact with the other people. And as we have discussed several times before, that a lot of knowledge transfer is done by interacting with other people in the corridors, in the informal sessions, in the meetings, in informal meetings, and so on and so forth. So these get-togethers, they can develop a knowledge sharing culture, right? So in one meeting, you trigger a question, you get some basic information from a peer or from a senior person, you get another chance in the next meeting, you will build upon that discussion to trigger more discussion, to get more knowledge, and so on and so forth. So these informal sessions, they will go a long way in developing a knowledge sharing culture. Newsletters to publicize KM initiatives and celebrate good role models. So the newsletters, they give exposure to the people who took knowledge management initiatives or who became role models in knowledge sharing activities. KM pilot projects such as expertise, location system, intranets with space devoted to different communities of practice, and so on and so forth. So these knowledge management pilot projects, they can help in developing a knowledge sharing culture. Change performance evaluation criteria to reflect and assess knowledge sharing, right? So the companies, they can change the performance evaluation criteria so that the people who are the more they share their knowledge, the more points they get, and the more promotions they get, right? And on the other hand, censor knowledge hoarders and reward effective knowledge sharers. The people who are just hoarding the knowledge, who are not sharing the knowledge, they should be censored and they should not be awarded. Redesign workplaces to allow for gathering places. Okay, so many companies, they have cubicles or shared offices or shared places on which they can the people can gather, and they can share or learn from each other. They can share their knowledge. So these are some of the good practices that can develop knowledge sharing culture in an organization. At the end, we will see the impact of mergers on the culture, and we'll quickly see the impact of the virtualization on the culture. Well, many times it's very common in the corporate world to merge two organizations together. One organization acquires another organization, or it merges with an organization. So now the two cultures, they are married together. So these are some of the basic questions that we need to ask to develop a new culture which will emerge from merger of the two companies. So what are the most compatible elements of our former organization's culture? We need to identify the commonalities between the two organization culture, the previous cultures. What are the elements that suggest potential conflict? On the other end of the spectrum, we need to identify the most conflicting components of the two cultures. What would we like the new organization's culture to look like? We need to identify the target culture, what we want to see in the new organization culture. What do we want to be certain to bring forward into the new culture? What we can bring forward from those two cultures? What will be some indicators of successful culture integration in our new organization? So how to measure our success that we have successfully integrated the culture in our new organization, right? So it's a tricky part. It's not easy, and we are not going to into the details. But whenever a merger happens, the two cultures are also married together, and we need to find the right balance, and we need to pick the best of both cultures to develop a new culture. The last thing is the virtualization, the impact of virtualization on a culture. While nowadays many companies they do not have a former brick and mortar office, right? A physical office or a physical organization. Many organizations run in a virtual mode in which we do not have physical office, but the people are hired from many parts of the world and they work together by using virtual collaboration environments, right? So there are many challenges in these virtual organizations. There is no formalization. Each person follows his or her own norms, styles, and ideas. Because there is no coherent or a single culture, everybody will follow his own way of doing the things. There is no shared values, beliefs, ideas, or norms. A person sitting in China has completely different values from a person sitting in Saudi Arabia, from one sitting in Canada. So when a team has people from all these parts of the world working together, then of course they do not have any shared values, beliefs, or ideas. There's no framework or policies that guide individuals working in these organizations, right? We do not have strict policies that we can impose on these people. There is very limited interaction between the people, and the interaction that happens, it is through impersonal channels. The computers, they are very impersonal, so it's very challenging, extremely difficult to develop a shared sense of belonging. So the people, they do not come to a building, they do not interact with other people in real life, so they cannot develop a sense of belonging. So the virtualization is very challenging for developing a culture in the organization, right? So at the end, we will see some minimum requirements. We will see some knowledge management barriers and some possible solutions. We quickly go through them. One key barrier is lack of time and meeting place. So possible solution is to conduct seminars or e-meetings or virtual spaces, provide the people a way to interact with each other at the convenience of their home or the location. Status and rewards to knowledge owners. We have discussed before that we need to give certain incentives. We need to consider knowledge sharing in the performance evaluation and identify the role models. Lack of absorptive capacity. The people cannot absorb the knowledge, so we hire them for openness. We can educate the people about how to make use of the available knowledge. Another barrier is not invented here syndrome. Many people, they will say that this practice is not invented here. This it will not work well in our organization, right? So a possible solution is non-hierarchical approach based on quality of ideas, not status of resource. So we can have objective assessment uh, of the ideas or the practices, and we can adapt them according to our local environment. Intolerance for mistakes and need for help or lack of trust, another barrier. The people, they do not tolerate the mistake. So the possible solution is accept and reward creativity, collaboration, and no loss of status for not knowing everything. We Nobody knows everything, so we accept this lack of knowledge as a basic limitation of every individual. The last thing is lack of common language. By language, we do not mean like the natural language, English or Spanish language, but we mean the technical language the engineers speak versus the managerial language. So the technical people, they have different terminology, they have different norms, they have different targets or goals, and the managers, they have competing objectives or goals. So this is a barrier, knowledge management barrier. So possible solution is a common set of keywords, standard formats, translators, knowledge journalists, and knowledge editors that can help in finding a common platform for all the people. So that's all. We have discussed the different what do we mean by culture, the different types of culture, and how the organizations can develop a knowledge sharing culture in their organization. Thank you very much. See you next time in the next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.